1 of Ecclesiastes, and I've been able to be here for many of the intervening weeks, and I want to remind you of what we discovered week 1 as three driving theses of the book of Ecclesiastes, because if you lose sight of these, you might expect the book to be something that it's not. And I said week 1, and I'll repeat it in case you missed it. Ecclesiastes, perhaps more so than any book of the Bible, any other book of the Bible, drags you to the very long view. If you want a book of the Bible to help you live victoriously on Monday, stay out of Ecclesiastes. I've jokingly said that if I sold Bibles, I would have seals, those little fold-over seals on the edge of the Song of Solomon saying, do not read this until you are either married or within a week of getting married. And I would have seals around the book of Ecclesiastes saying, until you are quite comfortable with the notion that you are going to die, do not mess with this book. And by the way, I'm not suggesting suicidalism or death wish. That's not what's going on. But the book that we have used as sort of a source book for the study, Gibson's Living Life Backward, his thesis, and I think he's right, is that the book of Ecclesiastes is about living in light of dying. Week 1, I said that 3 driving theses in the book of Ecclesiastes. You are going to die. And I know the Lord's return will interrupt that statistic for a generation at some future point. Neither you nor I know what that future point is. And I know that everyone so far who has guessed it's their generation has been wrong. And I just as soon not sign on for a point of view that is batting 0 so far. So I'm perfectly at ease with the viewpoint. I'm not at ease with the idea of dying yet. I'm trying to get there, but I'm at ease with the viewpoint that death is coming for us. Number 1, you're going to die. Number 2, you're going to die pretty soon. As things go, you got years, maybe decades. And as history is measured, that's just not all that long. And by the way, come to Ecclesiastes for a rousing, good, encouraging time. I think it ends up being quite encouraging. But it doesn't get there by a path that we would expect. You're going to die, and you're going to die soon. Third thing. I'll chase a rabbit for a moment to get to this third thing. I have the privilege at intervals to share a prayer in the devotion. How many of y'all have ever even know of or have visited the Fallen Sheriff's Memorial at Lakes Park? It's tucked away in a corner. You won't find it accidentally. Yeah, it's a very, very nice memorial to those who have died in the line of duty, serving as sworn officers in the Lee County Sheriff's Office. Going back to here's why today matters. The earliest officer memorialized, the earliest mortality memorialized on that memorial, and the names and dates of officers who have died, deputies who have died are on the memorial. The furthest one back is September 11. Today. February 12. I don't know what day it is. I don't know what month it is. February 12 of 1972. His name was Deputy Eva. His last name was EVA. He had, there was an escapee from one of the jails here in Lee County. Guy got out. Even didn't know what he was. He stopped a guy on a traffic infraction of some sort. In the course of the traffic stop, he realized this is our escapee. And he arrested him, and a struggle ensued. And the guy got his gun and killed him. That was 1972. Often, and I try to go to as many of these as I can when I'm in town. And for some of the recent ones, there are officers who served with the individual. For some of them, they're still family members. For Deputy Eva, I mean, I was 10 when he was shot and killed. There's nobody still working for the sheriff's office that remembers him. In fact, I asked, well, do we know, is his family still in the area? And nobody knew. So a bunch of people who did not know him. We have a nice lady who sings the Star Spangled Banner, and there's a very good bagpiper who plays Amazing Grace, and a color guard lays a wreath, and about 8 of us. I spoke from Joshua 4 and the stones of remembrance, setting up stones so that when your children ask you in time to come, what do these stones mean, is a fairly time-honored practice if you've read Joshua 4. My point? Nobody there actually remembers Deputy Eva. I'm sure it was the top news story for a while in Lee County when it happened. It hadn't been that many years. You're going to die. You're going to die pretty soon, and it won't take long for no one to remember you were here. Now, why does that matter? And why is that not awful news? We weren't created. We certainly weren't born again for here. The here-ness of here is a preparatory prologue. And what Ecclesiastes is doing is in a not too gentle way, grabbing hold of you to pull you from here, to pull you up and out. Now, here matters. Here matters. It is here we came to faith in Christ. It is here we lived out our obedience. It is here we began the journey of being conformed into His image. It is here that we, I shouldn't have to make a strong argument that everything we do in life matters, right? But Ecclesiastes comes along and says, yeah, that's all well and good. But you do know when you think ultimately, and that's a really, really heavy adverb, it's chasing the wind. So work hard, build your business. Chase the wind. Work hard, have your success, and gain your knowledge. You're chasing the wind. Chase the wind in any manner that pleases you. It's better than chasing the wind in manners that displease you. Just don't think it's ultimate. He's going to save his positive affirmations regarding, he foreshadows some of his positive affirmation regarding ultimateness through some of the statements in the book, but he's really going to save it all to about the last 3 sentences. And in the last 3 or 4 sentences of the book, which is not where we'll be tonight, he's going to say there is something that matters. that's not chasing the wind. But, so, chapter 7. The grand thesis. I'll make it my Roman numeral 1. Roman numeral 1, these are not going to be alliterated. Ecclesiastes doesn't lean into word games for me. I can't get in my word. I love word games. Word games help me memorize. Word games give me scaffolding in my head to hang things on. I know that it's gimmicky. I will plead guilty to first-degree gimmickry. When I'm down in Ecclesiastes, the gimmickry feels funny to me. It feels odd. So no gimmicks, just here it is. Roman numeral 1, death is one of our great teachers. Death is one of our great teachers. That's verses 1 through 6. A good name is better than precious ointment, and the day of death than the day of birth. It is better to go to the house of mourning than to go to the house of feasting. For this is the end of all mankind, and the living will lay it to heart. Sorrow is better than laughter. For by sadness of face, the heart is made glad. The heart of the wise is in the house of mourning, but the heart of fools is in the house of mirth. Giddiness. It is better for a man to hear the rebuke of the wise than to hear the song of fools. For as the crackling of thorns under a pot, so is the laughter of the fools. This also is vanity. Active consideration of looming mortality will yield a harvest of gravity and wisdom. Early in ministry, I had an older pastor who was a part of the pastoral ministry staff at a church that I served. And I was very new. I was 3 or 4 years out of seminary, and we were talking about weddings and funerals one day. And he said, well, Russell, you're going to, down the years ahead, you'll do some weddings and you'll do some funerals. And I said, I imagine I will. And he said, can I tell you? And he was probably about the age I am now. He said, here's what I've learned. I honestly prefer funerals to weddings. And I thought, wow, that's morbid. And he said, really, it's 2 reasons. Number 1, I've never gotten into a real argument with the mother of the deceased. And mothers of the bride have given me some grief down the year. And second, at a funeral, you can talk about death and what comes after, and the people in the room are more prone to listen when death has just come for someone that they love. And I think my mentor back in the day did not quote Ecclesiastes 7, but I think he's making the same point. If our overarching purpose in life is to be more prepared for the realities of eternity, I've settled into a role. I've done it for the birth of all 4 of my grandkids. In all 4 of those cases, because both my children are boys, around the birth of the grandkid, I am paternal grandfather. When a little one is born, maternal grandmother, if all four grandparents are available, maternal grandmother is the all-star. Mama who just gave birth wants her mama. Typically, that's the first string grandparent. As things unfold, and I am so at peace with this, I love my daughters-in-law and they love me. Do you know who the least crucial grandparent in the room is? Paternal grandfather. You know what my job is? I go for food. I go for food. I have showed up with breakfast sandwiches. I have showed up with Chick-fil-A. And it's always, I wish somebody would just get me something decent to eat. That is my lane. I love, love, love the celebration around the birth of the little ones. And don't even get me started on my love of grandparenting. But I don't know that those days have driven me, maybe the gratitude part, but those days haven't broken up part of my flesh to make me more like Jesus. It's the deaths that do that. The heart of the wise is in the house of mourning. Frivolity and distraction disconnect us from the weight of ultimate reality. I read a lot, and I try to keep in the mix of what I'm reading. No, I don't try to keep, I do. I keep in the mix of about 1 out of 4, 1 out of 5 books that I read is some lightweight fiction. Tom Clancy keeps publishing, though he's been dead for years, because there are a couple of authors that have taken up the mantle. And actually, if you're into, you can start with The Hunt for Red October, and there were 2 books published this year that are in that same continuity. The so-called Ryan verse, named for Jack Ryan, the lead character in The Hunt for Red October. I read those when they get published. Take me 2.5 hours maybe to read one, because I don't think. I just get carried along on the techno-thriller fiction and characters that I have identified with over the years in the long story arc of all those books. And it's an absolute, total waste of time in the purest of senses. Doesn't make me more like Jesus. I don't think it makes me any less like Jesus, but it doesn't make me more like Jesus. Doesn't cause me to ever put my pen down and say, I shall think deeply on this. There's nothing there for that. If the good guys win and the bad guys lose, usually in fairly spectacular ways, you know. But it doesn't make me more like Jesus. ICUs, tears, funerals. The weight of that. That's what the first few verses of this is saying. Death is a teacher. And what death is trying to teach us are the fruit of wisdom. So Roman numeral 2, wisdom's lessons in light of fleeting life and approaching death. I told you the outline wasn't cute. Wisdom's lessons. And he kind of, in the next few verses, I think down through verse 10, this is verses 7, 8, 9, 10, he's going to rapidly, kind of now he's spinning out some proverbs. Remember, this is wisdom literature. And so proverbs, proverbial type sayings are part of the formula. The first thing he talks about is money. Surely oppression drives the wise into madness, and a bribe corrupts the heart. What's he saying? He's saying, use money wisely. Avoid madness and corruption. In the broader sense, what he's saying is, and this ties into what we talked about last week, view the pursuit of wealth in light of everything else Ecclesiastes is saying. The wisdom literature never condemns gaining wealth. In fact, the wisdom literature collectively says quite a bit about gaining wealth. But it does condemn the disproportionate enthusiasm for wealth. Gail and I have decided to go ahead and begin our process of downsize move. We've been in the same house, in the same community, since we lived in an apartment our first year here from the summer of 2002. Can it have been that long? To the summer of 2003. But we've lived in the house we live in since the summer of 3. We raised our boys in it. The house has served us amazingly well. But we have signed a listing agreement, and they're coming with the photographer and all that sort of stuff in the next couple of days. And this is not an advertisement. I have a point. One of the features of our house, and we tweaked the floor plan a little bit to get this, because like many of you moving down here from Kentucky, in Kentucky we had a basement. When we moved down here, we discovered people in Florida don't store things. What I have now learned is we all cheat. That's why there are storage units on every block of every street. And by the way, I've got one now. We tweaked our floor plan so that four out of the 5, we have 5 bedrooms. We never needed that many, but we did. And 4 out of 5 have big walk-in closets. I never knew what hoarders we were. When I tried to take a fresh look, what would a person think opening this closet for the first time? Would that person think, my, this is a roomy closet? Or would that person think, wow, this is a hoarders episode? So I have worked diligently for the last couple of weeks to... And of course, for us, it's not as simple as throwing things away. You can't do that in the first place. You put it in the storage unit, pay to store it for 2 years, and then you throw it away. I know. I'm falling. But as I move things to the storage unit, one of my favorite sound bites from Hoarders, and I admit watching Hoarders is another of my guilty pleasures. I guess I read Tom Clancy novels and I watch Hoarders episodes. One of the shrinks on Hoarders said, when it comes time to help people get rid of things, there's 2 types of people. People who can get rid of something and people who have to tell the story. If you fall into the trap of having to tell the story, well, my Aunt Bertha gave me this when I was an 8th grader. If you have to tell the story, you're never going to be able to just say, that is an artifact. It had its run in my life. It is now over in my life, and I can part with it without trauma. That's how you de-hoard. Everything I pulled out of those closets, 20 years of archaeology I did in those closets. Everything in those closets was a thing I thought was worth buying at some point. And then it went into the strata of the closet where it has existed untouched, unused, and inconsequential, in some cases, for near 2 decades. I found one box taped up from our move from Kentucky to our move here. I told Gail, I said, come with me, we'll do a time capsule. Let's find out what we thought was important. That's everything you'll ever buy. Your car is premature junk. Your house is premature rubble. And the thing right now, I love electronics. Do you know how hard it is to get rid of obsolete electronics? The garbage man doesn't even want them. You have to do extra special steps to get rid of your old electronic stuff. At least you're supposed to. A lot of electronics I had to have, now I'm having to pay somebody to rid me of them. Have a wise relationship with your stuff. when you consider what you're going to spend money on, it's not a bad thing to say, is this worth spending money on, given that I'm going to die soon, and not long after I die, nobody will remember me? Therefore, is it wise to spend money on this? Maybe it is. Maybe it isn't. And certainly corrupt things, evil things. So money. Second thing he talks about is patience. Verse 8, better is the end of a thing than its beginning. But the patient in spirit is better than the proud in spirit. That's an interesting contrast. Patience is better than pride. I think I know what he's after. Pride says, I want to get it done. I want to get it done now. I want to get it done. I want my name on it. Let's get it done. Get it done. Get it done. Get it done. Patience says, I suppose this is how we're chasing the wind right now. And it matters. But it doesn't matter enough to make my life turbulent or weird or unbalanced or obsessive or disproportionately driven. Nothing wrong with having goals and ambitions and aspirations. Nothing wrong with that at all until they're driving. Until they're driving. Until they, rather than the pursuit of Christ, becomes what you're pursuing. Are you when something you desire to achieve or attain or accomplish presents itself to you, is your approach to that more prideful or more patient? I think that's what verse 8 is inviting you to consider. Patience. Anger. Be not quick, verse 9, be not quick in your spirit to become angry, for anger lodges in the heart of fools. My daddy had a term. And it took me some years and years and years of working around populations of people to understand this label my father had for people, some people. Here's what my dad noticed, and I think I'm aligning with what he thought he observed. There are some people who enjoy being annoyed or angry, independent of the reasons for their present frustration. They just have a setting. My father's name for it was, that is a person who is always a fit, looking for a place to pitch. They woke up this morning saying, what I'm going to do today is pitch a fit. Can't wait to figure out why. It's given that I'm going to pitch a fit. Now, we'll see what the excuse is for me to do so. Because something today is going to cause me to pitch a fit, because I pitch a fit every day. The list of reasons to be legitimately angry is pretty short. And righteous anger generally will center on the oppression of someone that's not you. Righteous anger is generally when something is happening to somebody else. The exploitation in the temple that was going on, for example, led to the braiding of whips and the flipping of furniture from our king. How short is your fuse? And have you considered how easily angered you are, and if you have a tendency to be fairly easily angered, have you taken that characteristic of yourself and held it up to to the light of your soon approaching death. The very first verse of this chapter says a good name is better than precious ointment. And he doesn't change the subject. That's not a standalone statement different from what comes. A good name. Where do they talk about the person that you were more than any other setting for you, unless you get celebrity roasted, and you're probably not going to? When is the setting where you are most likely to have the most people in the room talking about your name and your character? Your funeral. It's not a change of subject. So will there be people at your funeral saying, he's a pretty good guy, but you didn't want to make him mad? And everybody in the room is going to say, you sure didn't, you sure didn't, you sure didn't, because everybody in the room knows you're a hothead. They're putting a happy spin on it because it's your funeral, and that's what we do. But through your life, they all knew they had to tiptoe around you because you're such a hothead. Don't be that. Don't be that. Oh, it's just the way I am. Ooh, Christian, you never, ever, ever, ever get to play that card unless, if you were born with one leg and you say, well, I can't run track because this is just the way I am, then okay. But if it's attitudinal or behavioral, no. You do not get to wrap yourself in excuses for sin and blame some shape in your personality as though you get some lifetime pass on the process of becoming like Jesus and yielding the fruit of the Spirit. Is laying on the horn and losing my mind in traffic? Is that the behavior of someone who knows they're going to die and die soon? Or is that the behavior of someone who is quite important today, and how dare you slow me down? Anger. And then this one, and I did not want this one on this list, but God the Holy Spirit, through the pen of the preacher, put it there. The fourth thing is nostalgia. Nostalgia. I'm almost sorry to expose you to this verse because you are about to be accountable for it. If you've never, you always were because it's always been here, but your accountability is about to be heightened by verse 10. Say not, why were the former days better than these? I remember when I moved here, there was 1 month of the year that you had to deal with traffic on Daniels. Maybe January. Maybe a little bit. The other day, going home right at peak rush hour, which is, I'm often able to get out a little ahead of rush hour. I'm very often a little bit behind rush hour. But I hit right in rush hour. I decided to go the back way. I went down 6 Mile to Daniels. I live near Palomino and Daniels. I turn off there. From the time I turned left onto 6 Mile to the time I turned left off of 6 Mile, 35 minutes passed. Wasn't like that in 2002, I'll tell you that. I remember when that Publix at Fiddlesticks was a pasture. I'll tell you that. Here's the problem with nostalgia. Nostalgia wraps you up in a false picture of a false past. A false picture of a false past. And you end up longing for that which never was. When they opened Hollywood Studios at Disney World, the third theme park, Animal Kingdom was the fourth, Magic Kingdom was the first, and then Epcot, and then, y'all are looking at me like you're too sanctified to understand a conversation about Disney World. Lighten up. The Magic Kingdom, and then Epcot about 11 years later, and then at the time, it was called Disney MGM Studios, and then Animal Kingdom came last. The tagline for Disney MGM Studios, when they first opened, the tagline was that it was a tribute to the Hollywood that never was, but always will be. An imaginary golden age back there somewhere that in fact never actually happened. A lot of the chapters of our lives we can do that with. We spiff them up, and then we look backward to them longingly, and it's so far so good, by the way, looking back longingly. There's nothing wrong with having a healthy relationship with your own memories. But when the present and future become devalued because we are so enamored with this spiffed up version of the past, that's problematic, right? Because the past is on the scrap heap. It's gone. It's gone. We're going to be doing this on Colonial Blvd. We just are. Okay. Daniel soon, I'm told. Okay. And that is our world in this brief future we have before we all go home. Gibson makes the point in his book, and I think he's right, I never thought about this before, that this desire to idolize a time and place, to idealize and idolize another time and place, for me, the little town of Callahan, Florida, in the back half of the 1970s. I was a high school kid. And it was Mayberry. At least I remember it as Mayberry. Everybody was nice. Everybody knew everybody. Blah, blah. By the way, none of that is true. But it becomes that. Gibson says what's going on there is a longing for heaven. That because we're not able to construct a three-dimensional model of heaven in our brains, we have what Scripture teaches us, but that honestly is pretty thin. A couple of chapters for where we're going to spend eternity. So what our brains do is, let me imagine a place where everything was kind of wonderful. Whether it was or not, in fact, it wasn't. Every place you're nostalgia for is a place on a fallen world, and it was broken and weird, and you're fictionalizing it. You're putting a coat of sepia tone paint on it and turning it into something it wasn't. It's the longing for heaven. It's the longing for heaven. So, rather than dwelling in the past, let's think about what's compatible with what Ecclesiastes is teaching us. We're going to die, and we're going to die soon, and our time on earth is not going to matter all that much when all is said and done for us. And let's long for heaven. Let's let the nostalgia stuff for older, earlier versions of what earth was to us. Let's kiss and hold those memories, but let's stop idealizing and idolizing those past chapters, that we would live in the present and long for the future. That's what Ecclesiastes is saying about nostalgia. Roman numeral 3. From verse 14 down to verse 25, which is the scope of what we're looking at, it's a series of fairly rapid fire proverbs, seemingly disconnected thoughts, but he's not changed his mind. What he's saying is, therefore consider things with wisdom. But at the end of the day, even that wisdom is not going to get you complete satisfaction with this life, because you're not supposed to be completely satisfied with this life. So what I wrote down for my Roman 3 is wisdom's limited benefits. Wisdom is good with an inheritance, an advantage to those who see the sun. For the protection of wisdom is like the protection of money. And the advantage of knowledge is that wisdom preserves the life of him who has it. The protection of wisdom is like the protection of money. All right, let's see if we can draw some conclusions from that comparison. If you go to crank your car tonight or in the morning, and you turn the key or push the button or whatever it is you do in your car, and there's just absolutely nothing. No clicking, no whirring, no straining. You got nothing. I'm no mechanic, but I've driven cars for a long time. What is the prime suspect? What has failed? First thing you're going to check is the battery. And in most cases, that's what's going on. Money will solve that problem. Right? Adrian Rogers, a pastor I served under years ago, used to say, if you have a problem that money can solve, you don't really have a problem. I didn't much agree with that when I was much, much younger, but I had not seen enough people faced with problems that no amount of money could solve. Having been around people with problems that no amount of money can solve, I think I agree with what he was getting at. What is a decent new battery going to cost you? A couple hundred? Way high, way low? I don't know. I haven't bought a battery of late. Some of y'all are nodding. Nobody's violently shaking their head. Some of y'all are smarter than me about stuff are kind of nodding. Let's say it's a couple hundred. Probably nobody in the room has got a couple hundred laying around thinking, I'll just, throw this to the four winds and not miss it. A couple $100 is more than you're going to spend on lunch tomorrow. It's not pocket money. But it quite possibly won't wreck your life to have to come up with $200 to buy a battery. If you've got a car, you're already paying $50 a tank for gas. So you can probably come up with $200 for a new battery if you absolutely had to. Put it like this. If we prayed earlier for someone who's got liver and pancreatic cancer. If tomorrow you knew you were going to, if you get to pick, tomorrow you're going to deal with a dead battery or you're going to deal with a liver cancer diagnosis. Now, suddenly, the dead battery is just nothing. Money will protect you from some stuff, but not all of it. That's his comparison. Wisdom will protect you from some stuff. But that protection will never be complete because there are going to be things that are going to happen, things that are going to puzzle you beyond wisdom's capacities. Wisdom's helpful, like money is helpful. But even there, don't look for ultimate answers even in wisdom, just like you wouldn't in money. Consider the work of God. Who can make straight what God has made crooked? What he means is God is going to insist. Well, let me step back a step. If you're going to think biblically, if you're going to have a biblically driven world view, you must reckon in your world view that the Bible teaches over and over and over and over and over and over again that with reference to how his universe is unfolding, God is conducting himself as the one in charge. It is a fundamental characteristic of the living God. He is providential, he is sovereign, he is in charge. Now, if you'd like to imagine a God where there's all kinds of wiggle room in the universe for things that happen and God whips his head around and goes, now tell me again what just happened. If that would make you more comfortable, that's fine, but you're not worshiping the God who is. You've constructed a puny little idol. The godness of God forces us to conclude that He is sovereign in all things. Wow, there's a lot that doesn't make sense. Look at what the author says. In the day of prosperity, be joyful. In the day of adversity, consider God has made the one as well as the other. Boy, if there were no other verse in the Bible to launch a torpedo into the prosperity gospel, that would do it, right? God's in charge when it all is flowing and going, and God is in charge when it's all off the rails. So that man may not find out anything that will be after him. That is, so that you don't get too big for your britches, and I don't either. In my vain life, I've seen everything. There's a righteous man who perishes in his righteousness, and there's a wicked man who prolongs his life in evil doing. The godly young wife loves her kids, loves her husband, loves her church, passes away with a horrible illness before she ever sees 40. And the villain that everybody knows is a villain, foul, profane, awful, lives to be 105. Now, if you want to be at ease, in error, but at ease, God's just not in charge of things to that level of detail. You feel more comfortable with yourself, but you're worshiping an idol. What we have to do, and the wisdom literature makes us do it time and time again, is we have to go, God, that's you. Ultimately. Behind all of it. That's you. And there is no amount of wisdom. I can be wise enough to realize that is you. But that still leaves me going, what in the world are you up to? Why do you oversee so much that is just incomprehensible? Wisdom, by the way, will admit incomprehensibility. Gibson says in the book, and I love it, a little wisdom is the dangerous thing, because a little wisdom thinks, oh, I'm starting to see how God does stuff. As though you're thinking, so from here on out, He's going to be pretty predictable. Wrong. 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 And again, you've got two options. Either God is not in charge. By the way, that option is not viable biblically. Or God is in charge and He sure does things differently than what makes sense to me a whole lot of the time. That's why I lean so hard on it's His glory and my good. All the intermediate steps, I have no idea. A high percentage of the time, well, why do you think the Lord? I have no idea. In the near term, I have no earthly idea a whole lot of the time. But in the long term, His people will praise Him to His glory and our good. We may have to bump through a lot of incomprehensibility, and wisdom won't get you out of that. Verse 16, 17. Be not overly righteous, and do not make yourself too wise. Why should you destroy yourself? Now, I'll come back. Be not overly wicked, neither be a fool. Why should you die before your time? What's he saying? The admonition is against self-righteousness. Self-righteousness. I have some friends that are And this is pretty predictable if you know the history. Do you know what one of the driving forces in young Martin Luther's life was? He was a Catholic monk, and he wanted to get all of his sins confessed. He understood the Catholic doctrine of confession, and he wanted to do a complete job. On multiple occasions, his confessor in the monastery said to him, "Luther, you've got to stop now. I'm going to have to sleep." As Luther would just dredge up sin after sin after sin after sin, take a breath and dredge up more sin after sin after sin after sin, because Luther at least understood the ramifications of the work salvation system he was in, where verbally making confession to a superior priest was the means to absolution of sin, and he didn't want to leave any stone unturned. And so he confessed and he confessed and he confessed and the hours went on and on and on, and finally the priest to whom he was confessing said, "Uncle! Uncle!" Luther was trying to do what this verse in this book is telling you not to try to do. Luther was trying to get to a place of righteousness by his own effort. And A, he couldn't succeed, and B, to the degree he would have succeeded, it would have pushed him further from Christ, because it would have increased his confidence in his own righteousness, which is a bad thing. Certainly don't be wicked. Grace. It is good that you should take hold of this, and from that withhold not your hand, for the one who fears God shall come out from both self-righteousness and wickedness. Now, this is one of those brief, rare moments in Ecclesiastes where he's giving away his conclusion. If you read fast, you'll miss it. The one who fears God shall come out from the driving need for self-righteousness and from the grip of the most atrocious of sin. Wisdom gives strength to the wise man more than 10 rulers who are in a city. That's good. Surely there is not a righteous man on earth who does good and never sins. Well, that is also taught over and over and over and over again in Scripture. Again, I told you this is sort of a stream of Proverbs. 21 and 22 is fun. It's a little brutal, but it's fun. Do not take heart all the things that people say, lest you hear your servant cursing you. Your heart knows that many times you yourself have cursed others. I had an interesting experience at work the other day. I think it might have been Monday afternoon. Peter, I don't know if you were in the room with Bowman's not in here right now. Bowman was in the room, some of the younger guys. Christian, you were in the room when it happened, weren't you? I walked up on a gathering of guys eating lunch in the executive conference room, and as I walked up, one of the guys was doing a spot-on mocking impersonation of me. And I was in the hall and heard it. And I am blessed to report that my first response is, I know that I'm fair game. I'm glad that at least it's with laughter that they're making fun of me, not tears or anger that they're making fun of me. Because I overheard enough to know that I was laughingly being made fun of, as I have laughingly made fun of other people that I didn't think were around a time or two or 10. This verse is saying, look, if you happen to hear through the door somebody saying unkind things about you, before you get up in arms, take a beat. And how many times on the other side of the door have you said unkind things about people? Before you get all up in a twist because, well, I heard what y'all said about me. How many times in your life could someone have heard what you were saying about them? If you're going to plead innocent to that, you're a liar and would lie about other things too. Right? It's a good reminder. It's a good reminder. Do not take to heart all the things that people say. He starts to conclude, as am I. All this, and I think he's going back to the whole flow of thought of chapter 7. All of this I have tested by wisdom. I said, I will be wise. Meaning, I'm gonna get this. I'm gonna lock this down. But it was far from me. That which has been is far off and deep, very deep. Who can find it out? I turned my heart to know and to search out and seek wisdom and the scheme of things, and to know the wickedness of folly and the foolishness that is madness. So in a book about wisdom that reminds us that most of life's pursuits are vanity and chasing the wind, what he just basically told us is the pursuit of wisdom is vanity and chasing the wind, ultimately. Our living God is not a series of axioms and algorithms. Our living God is not a collection of rules to live by so you can be victorious. Our living God is one whom we know and love, whom we are blessed, who knows us, and by that we are blessed, who cares about us, and by that we are blessed. He is a person with whom we have relationship, and we can know quite a lot about him, but not everything. And we can understand quite a lot of what he's up to, but he'll never stop puzzling us. If he were formulaic and predictable and the universe were just a predictable machine ticking along, a clock on a shelf, that would be an argument against the personhood of God. And he's a person. So, takeaways from tonight. I have a poem. And it's long, so I am going to inflict it on you, but it'll be the last thing I do. And maybe, anybody here acquainted with Columbia International University in South Carolina, the former Columbia Bible College? Okay. Does the name Robertson McQuilkin ring a bell? Okay. He was the president of that school for some years. Actually resigned the presidency of that school in 1990. So he was a long ago president of that school. He passed away, actually, in 2016. Somewhere years and years ago, I became acquainted with this particular piece of writing by Robertson McQuilkin. And it's not a poem like a Dr. Seuss poem. It doesn't go ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta. He classed it as a poem. The title of this poem is Let Me Get Home Before Dark. And it's a contemplation of much of what I think this chapter is saying. So, if you'll forgive me. And if you just want to get up and leave, I understand. But if you stay with it, I think some of you will go home tonight and look this up so you can have your own copy of it, I bet. Let Me Get Home Before Dark by Robertson McQuilkin. It's sundown, Lord, and the shadows of my life stretch back into the dimness of the years long spent. I fear not death, for that grim foe betrays himself at last, thrusting me forever into life. Life with you, unsoiled and free, but I do fear. I fear the dark specter may come too soon, or do I mean too late? That I should end before I finish, or finish but not well. That I should stain your honor, shame your name, or grieve your loving heart. Few, they tell me, finish well. Lord, let me get home before dark. The darkness of a spirit grown mean and small, fruit shriveled on the vine, bitter to the taste of my companions, burdened to be borne by those brave few who love me still. No, Lord. Let the fruit grow lush and sweet, a joy to all who taste. Spirit sign of God at work, stronger, fuller, brighter at the end. Lord, let me get home before dark. The darkness of tattered gifts, rust-locked and half-spent or ill-spent, a life that once was used of God, now set aside. Grief for glories gone, or fretting for a task that God never gave. Mourning in the hollow chambers of memory, gazing on the faded banners of victories long gone. Cannot I run well into the end? Lord, let me get home before dark. The outer me decays. I do not fret or ask reprieve. The ebbing strength, but weans me from Mother Earth and grows me up for heaven. I do not cling to shadows cast by immortality. I do not patch the scaffold lent to build the real eternal me. I do not clutch about me my cocoon, vainly struggling to hold hostage a free spirit pressing to be born. But will I reach the gate in lingering pain, body distorted, grotesque? Or will it be a mind wandering untethered among light fantasies or grim terrors? Of your grace, Father, I humbly ask, let me get home before dark. He did, by the way. He finished well. Because I think the author of that poem had it figured out that death was coming and coming pretty soon. And very few things were going to matter very long on this earth. So, I don't know where Mark is. I hope we're doing like Philippians next. Come up for air. Actually, what are we doing? I know, but I don't know because I've got the book sitting on my desk right now to hit the study. At any rate, Ecclesiastes. Love God with everything you've got. I'll give away the ending because you're going to find out at the end that's all that's going to have not been chasing the wind. All right? Let me pray. Lord, darkness comes and it comes soon. The author of Ecclesiastes is going to call that moment the moment when the silver thread is cut. It's coming. May we live to live in light of our onrushing end. Lord, may we all strive to get home before dark. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Good night.